Welcome to Money Hacks, a podcast series by the Straits Times and the Business Times, where we offer tips for the newcomer to the financial investment scene. I'm your host, Ernest, and with me is Vipin Kalra, CEO of BankBazaar International. Welcome to the show, Vipin.
Thank you.
Now, Vipin, tell us about BankBazaar International. What is it for listeners who aren't familiar? And as CEO, what are the online trends in the market that you've noticed?
So BankBazaar is an online financial services marketplace. So think of us like an Amazon for financial services, where people can come, compare, search, and find the right financial product for their needs.
And what about the online trends in the market here in Singapore that you've noticed actually?
I think Singapore, perhaps more so than any other market, is very clearly a financially savvy market. Consumers are very much aware of what they want, and therefore they look for the best deals. So consumers in general are value seekers, but I think because most Singaporeans, almost 90% of Singaporeans are connected 24/7 online, they have access to information all the time. They are even more savvy in terms of looking for the best deal for the money.
Yeah, I must say Singaporeans are always hunting for a good deal. Because this episode targets sort of like the middle segment, the older, slightly older, late 40s to early 50s crowd. And we're looking at the kind of mistakes that Singaporeans might make in their financial planning for the future, especially in the next decade or so. What do you think? A lot of people forget about this. I mean, I found one great tip in one of your articles on your website, bankbazaar.sg. And it says we've got to be aware of how much money we would need in our retirement. We've got to factor in inflation at the rate of 2.5% per annum and adjust accordingly. I mean, there's a CPF calculator that we can also refer to on the CPF website. Can you tell us more about this? What are the kind of common mistakes that we make and what we should be looking at least 2 to 3 good tips?
One of the common things that we've observed in Singapore particularly, despite the fact that we have such a flexible CPF system, which provides for an ordinary account and a special account and also a supplementary retirement saving plan through third-party banks. Despite all of that well-established structure for saving, consumers in general make a mistake of underestimating how much they need. People don't sometimes calculate it very well in terms of how much I would need on a monthly basis when I retire. And the reason for that is that people don't realize the value of money in 20 years' time or 30 years' time. Things are getting more and more expensive, and therefore, whatever estimates we make need to be adjusted for that sort of inflation in the market. So I think that's why we provide a clean tip that you can take 2.5% as a rough guide, because the inflation varies somewhere between 2.5% to 3%. 2.5% is a good sort of average value for inflation per annum. So therefore, when you're thinking about how much money I would need in my retirement age, you need to think about what my current expenses are on a monthly basis, and then you adjust that by 2.5% on a per annum basis to see how much money you would need on a monthly basis when you retire. And therefore, you start to think about how much money I need to save for that sort of expenses to be affordable.
And how often do you have to do this process? Because sometimes it's about practice, right? You've got to do this. Is it every 2 years, once every 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 or 5 years?
I would highly recommend you assess your situation on an annual basis. It's always a good practice to take a good stock take of what's the inflation rate looking, how is my investment sort of paying off, am I on the right track or not, do I may need to make any adjustments in my savings plan, and therefore recalculate how much I would need. Has anything changed in the last year or so? So based on all of those factors, you take a good stock take of your current investment plan, your CPF, and then recalculate and make sure that you're on the right track.
And of course, if I'm in my late 40s and 50s, I mean, compared to someone in their 20s, I have a lot more responsibilities. Usually, whatever comes into the salary, most of it goes out. I'm only thinking in terms of small portions of savings, but that's not enough, right? We got to do more.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to ask you, Vipin, there's another great tip also in bankbazaar.sg, one of your articles. And this really, I think, addresses the elephant in the room, so to speak. It's credit card debt. We might have cleared our mortgages maybe by the time we reach our early 50s or something, for some of us at least. But credit card debt, how serious is that here?
It is still within manageable limits within Singapore. However, on an individual basis, I think everyone should need to take a very clear view of the debt situation. It is one of the common mistakes to go into a retirement age and not realizing how much I still owe. And as you mentioned quite rightly, the elephant in the room here is the credit card debt and some of the personal loan debt as well, personal loans, etc. So it is always a good idea to have a very clear view of how much I owe on an annualized basis. And I would even suggest that it's a good idea to bring all of your debt at one place. There are some great debt consolidation plans available through the banks in Singapore. And I would highly recommend people to take advantage of those debt consolidation plans to bring all your liabilities and debts at one place. So you know how much you owe and how much you have to repay before you get to your retirement plan. So by the time you get into your retirement age, you have limited means at that time. You're not earning your full salaries. Your only mean of income is your CPF and any other savings you might have. So the less debt you have, the better it is, the better off you are.
And what do you think of this idea of a debt consolidation plan? Was it a great feature that was recently introduced?
I think so too, absolutely. I think it has been introduced by pretty much every bank in Singapore. What it does is it gives you a clear view of all your liabilities. So you know how much I owe, and therefore you can plan your repayments and your spending, because you can only repay if you reduce your spending if you have a limited income. So the first step is to understand how much I owe. Second step is to reduce your spending so you can save more. And therefore third step is to repay more.
And of course, with one plan, it sort of helps you look at what you have and then what you can do to service that debt, right?
Correct. And I think there's a lot of information available on our website. So for any more detail on debt consolidation and how it works and what are some of the best plans in Singapore, please come and visit our website, www.bankbazaar.sg. And we have some great tips in terms of how to take advantage of that.
All right. Thanks, Vipin. Thanks for coming in. And that's a wrap for this episode of Money Hacks. Do send us your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. There are also more podcasts on various topics at the Straits Times and the Business Times. Now, do note that any financial or investment information in this podcast is for use in Singapore only and is intended to be for your general information. Any particular investment or decision should only be made after consulting with a fully qualified financial advisor.